But never worry about who's here and who isn't. The people that are here are the ones that need to be. Um, it says this, Job 42:3. I got my glasses on so I could see you all today. Okay? They come off, that means I'm scared of your reactions. It says, you asked, who is this that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? It is I. And I was talking about things I knew nothing about. This is Job talking to the Lord here. You know, like that. Who is that questions my wisdom with such ignorance? It is I. And I was talking about things I knew nothing about. This is what I really like. Things far too wonderful for me. Things far too wonderful for me. And then I want to read 1 Peter 4:12 and 13. It says, beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you, as though some strange thing happened unto you. It says, but rejoice inasmuch as you are partakers of Christ's sufferings, that his glory shall be revealed. Ye may be glad also with exceeding joy. I want to focus on this part. It says, how many times do you just want to understand? I just want to understand. I just want to know why. I just want it to all make sense. I want to know what you're doing. And how many times are you in the most difficult time of your life? And what you want more than anything is some comfort. And what you want more than anything is a friend. It's for that situation to embrace you and tell you, I got you. But it doesn't happen that way. Because sometimes it comes as a stranger. Peter said, think it not strange, the fiery trials that come to you. That's what I want to talk about. Sometimes it comes as a stranger. Yeah, sometimes it comes as a stranger. Okay. Jesus, bless the word, bless those to hear. Help me to do what I got to do. In Jesus' name I pray. You may be seated. You've heard it more than once. We've all come to our seemingly uncrossable brooks. We've all had our Esau's and hot pursuit. We've all had our Sauls trying to prevent us from getting to where we want to go. We've been around long enough to know that this Christian walk isn't as easy as some people first made it seem. We've all been here long enough to know that you can say it, name it, claim it, blab it, grab it. It don't work all that way. You can't lose with the stuff I use, until you're looking upwards, just trying to look down. Until something in life grips you in a way that you just weren't ready for. Till God takes you down a road that you never anticipated. I've been around long enough to know that there are some people that will follow as long as they feel good. And there are others that as soon as it gets hard, they're going to turn the other way. Never trying to understand what God is actually trying to reveal in their life. Each and every one of us are a testament to God's grace. Each and every one of us, as hard as we tried, could not pull ourselves out of the miry clay. Intention was never good enough. Desire, I was telling the other people the other day, is never enough. You can want to all you want, But if you're not willing to roll with the punches, take the blows, if you're not willing to roll with the thunder, as they say, and handle the heat when it comes your way, you're going to find yourself looking on the outside in when trials come your way. And sometimes, instead of being free, as maybe you see others, and enjoying the presence of the power of being in the midst of Christ, in the midst of God's presence, the shade seems to come over you. How many times have you been in a service hoping that the minute you walked in, God would give you that answer? At the minute that you felt the presence, and you look around and it seems like everybody else is getting it, but somehow it has not quite gotten to you yet. How do we make sense of that? At times we write off the possibilities of the moment. But if we are not careful, we will pass a critical time in our development where we get locked into the mentality that God is not going to do it this time, and we'll remove ourselves from a place of power we need to be walking in. I heard a story, and I'm going to go slow because I don't have a lot of voice, but I heard a story once. It was about a city that wanted to build a lion enclosure in their local zoo. They wanted this habitat to grace the animal life of their newly developed edifice. So they made arrangements for a lion to be shipped from the wild, perhaps a rescue lion. And they, of course, chose one at the proper age, one that would easily be adaptable, that would have longevity of life in his new habitat. The zoo was to be a replica of the wild. It was to mimic it perfectly. It says it was to be very comparable to what the lion would experience in the wild. It was going to be the pride of the city. But something happened when the lion got there that was unanticipated. The place wasn't finished in time. His habitat wasn't ready. It wasn't ready for him. His habitat was not completely developed. But then a situation came to where they had to find a cage for the lion, just for a small period of time, until its permanent living quarters could be developed fully. Just a little out of sync with timing. That's all it was. Just a timing issue. They found a cage that was maybe 3 feet wide, but 12 feet long. And it was the habitation for that lion for that particular period of time. And it was just a very insignificant period of time, they thought. I mean, what's a couple of days? You know, what should it matter? He's going to have all this freedom once it's ready. He's going to enjoy what he would enjoy in the wild, in captivity. So what is just a matter of time? It's very insignificant, they had thought. But the story goes that the time that was required to get this habitat to where it needed to be, that happened to be a very critical time in the development of this young lion. It just happened to be at a time where he was reaching maturity, where he was developing his king of the lion attitude, where he was forming his strength, where he was discovering his identity. So it just happened to be at that time of development that they had to put him in the cage. So while he was in that cage, so during that particular time while he was in that cage, all he had was 12 feet this way, and then 12 feet back this way, and then back again, and then turn around and back again. So the time came when they finally released him into his habitat, and he had all the freedom to roam, and he had all the things allowed or built for him to enjoy. He had all the area to consider his own, and he would walk 12 feet and then go back. 12 feet and then go back. No longer wrapped behind bars, no longer in a cage, but a prisoner in his mind. And here's the thing. There are some times, it is not always what happens to you. It's when it does. There's a lot of us that can handle just about anything that comes our way, except in a certain time. If it would not have happened in this particular time, I would have been okay, but you came at me when I least expected it. You came at me when I didn't know how to fight it. You came at me when I did not understand it, and now it's in my mind. And that's a trial I could have beat any other time. And that's a circumstances I could have challenged any time. But because it came when it did, I can't get it out. And God wants us to know today that there are things you could be enjoying. There are things in Him, in the kingdom, in the church you could be prospering in. But you will never do it if you can't get the cage out of your mind. It's not always about what happens to you. It's about when it does. I see people like that line. I see saints all the time in critical developments of their Christianity, starting to get good strongholds in faith in God, starting to develop strength and the mentality that God can. And then something comes their way that they just could not handle. And the mistake they'll make is that God has allowed an enemy or a stranger to come to my door. But I want you to understand, and I want to get there before we go, is that it was a friend all the time. Okay? I'm not here to judge anyone. Here at all. Been there, done that. Boy, I've been places in my mind I wouldn't want no one to travel. Been there, done that. I have. Circumstances that happen to us, situations that are brought to us, challenges offered to us, trials that come our way. If we are not very careful to handle it right, we can become marked and caged. And we can become victims and prisoners and hostages of circumstances that were just not handled correctly. It's a happy one. Trust me, it's a happy one. It's not that we aren't trying. We're all trying. It's not that we don't want to do right. We all want to do right. It's not that we don't want to see God in everything. We all want to see God in everything. It's that sometimes something came our way and we did not handle it the right way. Okay? And we reach, and we're in church, and we reach. All the time we reach. The word makes sense. I know what I'm supposed to do. I know I don't belong out there. I know what I'm supposed to be feeling. And we reach, and it just keeps passing us by. I see you. Okay, an experience that happened that I couldn't find the purpose for. How many guys you find things happen to you like, what was the purpose of that? Why did I have to go through that? That didn't belong here. We've already been through this. We're experienced Christians. Oh, you are. I'm going to tell you one thing, saints of God. When you declare your faith and your commitment and your dedication to God at any point of your walk with God, there is going to come a time in your life where all the things you said you are, the devil's going to come back and say, are you or aren't you? I've been hearing you say that for years, but are you or are you not? That test will come. It will come. Careful what you say. I told the pastor, I'm going to get a shirt that said I want to be like Job, but I thought against it. Said no one ever. I want to be like Job. Yeah, I said no one ever. Things can make a certain turn. And if we are not very sensitive or aware of this one thing, that God still has everything in control. One thing that's never happened is God has never been caught by surprise. The devil has never caught him sleeping, never caught him slumbering. What has happened to you is a surprise, but only to you sometimes. It's like, wow, I didn't expect that. Yeah, it says, but we got to convince ourselves. If we're not totally convinced that nothing ever catches God by surprise, if we are not totally convinced that Satan has never caught God with his head turned, nor sleeping, nor napping, ever, if we are not totally resolved that all things work together for the good, all things work together for the good. There's some things in your life you don't think could ever be good, but they're not in your hands. If we could ever get to a place where nothing that ever came to us would appear to be a stranger. How many times do we find circumstances barging into our world, maybe hiding and peeping through windows as though it was some kind of thief lurking in the shadows, waiting to destroy? I got 13 minutes. I don't even get close to finish, so we're going to get the cliff notes, okay? Okay. What is a trial? What is a fiery trial? If a trial wasn't good enough, let's make it fiery. That's what Peter said. The fiery trial. Well, a trial was good enough. Well, let's turn up the heat. Let's turn up the heat. Let's talk a little bit about, I don't know if it was the first trial. It may or may not, but let's talk about what the mother of trials is, and it's always Job. And the life of Job, what causes, and what are trials anyway? Where are they born? Where do they start? Who designs them? What gives birth to such a creature as a trial? You know, one of the favorite things I like to tell people is when they're going through something or they want to grow in the Lord, they ask me, what's the best way to grow, Brother Lorenzo? What I got to read, pray? I say, you just need a good trial. Really good trial. You'll grow all kinds with a good trial. That's what you need. Did I go to Bible school? No, you need a good trial. You need a good shove your face in the dirt and shake it around trial. Because only what's in you is going to come out. Yeah. So we're going to have a conversation today. I don't feel like going crazy. I don't even think I can. Well, okay, we got to make this quick. Okay, so Job's trial started with a conversation between Satan and the Lord. A conversation. He's like, Where you been, Satan? Oh, I've been to and fro, walking around, doing my thing. You know what I do? I seek, I steal, I kill, and I destroy. He didn't lie. You ever want to know what the devil's up to in your life? Just ask him. He'll tell you. He'll tell you. I tell people I've got an agreement with the devil. He tries to mess up everything I do, and I hate his guts. It's that simple. That's our relationship. You know, he says, have you considered my servant Job? Notice, Job's trial was a God idea. What Job went through had God's name on it. You know, sometimes we're trying to figure out why things are happening to us and why the pressure's got so hot because we still think everything's about us. You know, there are things that you are going through. There are tests that you are taking. There are steps you are making that got nothing to do with you. But they got God's name and God's reputation on the line. Yeah, it was a God idea. He says, have you considered Job? You know what Satan says? Have I considered Job? Been there, done that. You realize how many times Satan has tried to get to you and God just hasn't let him? Because that's what Satan was telling him. Oh, yeah, I know who he is. Of course I know who he is. But I also know you've got him protected. I also know you got a little hedge around him. And every time I try to get to him, you got him protected. And then God says, okay, well, let's let down a hedge. touch his body, don't touch his life. And that's how God, he keeps a hedge, removes a hedge, but then he allows access. But he never allows full access. Okay. Well, Satan had already checked it out and came to the conclusion, I can't touch him. I can't touch him unless you let some protection down. And then the accusation comes. He says, yeah, well, you've given him all this stuff. You've allowed him to excel in everything he touches. I'm paraphrasing. You allow him to reach certain things. He goes, and why wouldn't he praise you? Here's the thing. Never let your life with the Lord get to a place where the devil's convinced you're only tied to the treasure. Yeah. Because then what God will do one day is he will remove all the hedges you have in your life and figure out who you really are. What is going to happen if I take them down? What's going to happen if I stop protecting you? I wonder if we would realize in the spiritual realm the barrier of angels and powers that God surrounds us by on a daily basis. Remember, not everything is about you. Some things are not for you to understand. Some of things are for you to endure. They're not for you to understand. You don't always understand it. That's why Peter said, think it not strange. Because it's going to feel that way sometimes. Like, where in the world did this come from? Stranger at the door. We don't answer the door. I heard a story one day where the teacher was, she was in a class, and they asked a question. The teacher says, hey, what is temptation? And they say, that's when the devil knocks at your door and invites you for a walk. Little girl answers that. She says, oh, it's when the devil comes to your door and invites you for a walk. And they said, well, how do you fight temptation? And another little girl says, nobody wanted to answer. A little girl stands up and says, you don't answer the door. And then she says, well, what do you mean you don't answer the door? She goes, what if he keeps knocking? She says, and then you send Jesus to answer the door. If the devil's knocking, why are you answering? I'll let you guys be quiet for a little bit and think what you want to do here. I just want to find out what I really want to read and what I don't here. So some trials begin with God and God's confidence in you. You know, if God was confident with you, and I'm talking about a good one, I'm talking one that shakes your world. If God allows you to go through something that changes all your directions, it's his vote in you. It's his confidence that he can trust you. Has God ever trusted you with anything big? And said, I think he'll come out of it. I know he'll come out of it. And we might say, well, I don't like that game, preacher. I don't like that type of life. Why should we have to endure? Well, your master faced it. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he could have called legions of angels to pull him down in his darkest hour. But you know what he did? He said there are some causes and there are some things that come to your life that are greater than me delivering you out of it. Yeah, I could pull you out of it. But what's going to come from me not leaving you in it is greater than your deliverance. Yeah. And doesn't that hurt sometimes? Because we know God could end it, and he doesn't. Because God could fix it, and he doesn't. And then you can walk around just like that lion sometimes. Born for power, born for royalty, but walking in circles. And that happens in the kingdom. There's people in here with gifts and abilities to move the kingdom forward in a much greater way than we have seen. But we're walking in circles because there was a time in our life where the enemy touched us in a way that we can't shake. And every time we're supposed to run, we walk. And every time we're supposed to climb, we kneel. And every time we're supposed to move forward, we step back. And we walk back and forth, knowing that there's power in us. Knowing that there's greatness in us. Knowing that I am more than what you're seeing, but I can't get out of myself. All right. I'm going to stay up here because I might fall. I don't know, it's probably 30 years ago. I'm old. I'm getting old. 50 years old in just a few months, and I'm starting to feel it. But you know what? When I was 19 years old, I picked the microphone up. You all remember? Sister Minda used to chase me around. When you gonna come to the youth meeting? Yeah, I'll be there. I wouldn't show up. You gonna come to our fundraise? Brother Tom too. Just a young man, not knowing where he was going. But I picked up a mic one day, preached at a service. And I'm not here to brag. There's nothing to brag about. To all glory, go to God. And fire came out. And power came out. But you know, something happened a few years later. There was a young man. He was only 25 years old. Very nice, respectable young man. Got stricken, a family friend. Knew him since he was a little boy. Got stricken with cancer. It started to just ravage him. Just ravage his body. And we were in the church. Pastor was there. We had Brother Aaron. We had our pastor. We had a lot of experienced people with prayer, faith warriors. And this young man called for me. all I was a preacher. And sometimes I'm convinced that's all I ever am. Just a guy who can preach. But he called for me. And I'm like, there's got so many more people that are better, that have more faith, that have more prayer power. I started to visit him regularly, and God, he would just dissipate, body just shrinking, and it was brutal. His family would surround me. They had faith. Comes Brother Lorenzo. I'm going to pray. I don't got that kind of power. Don't have it. And as time went by, he slipped away, lost the fight. They never called anybody else really to come pray for him. Once they did. And I prayed for him many times, laid hands on him many times. And you know, like that, it was a critical time of development for me. I was a young preacher. I had to find out who I was. I was a kid. And in my mind, I lost the fight. Lost it. And ever since then, some of you may notice, some of you may not, I don't know. I don't pray for people. I don't like to. I don't. You've got to ask me to, and I won't say no if you ask me to. But I won't pray for people. You know why? Because I'm still walking back and forth, back and forth. Because at a critical time in my development, a stranger came, and I didn't know what was going on. And I think, how many times has somebody lost a healing? Has somebody lost a deliverance? Has somebody lost a move in their life? Because I have withheld my hand. And God is saying, I have filled you with power. And I have filled you with presence and anointing. And it's never been about yourself. And he tells me, think you're not strange, Lorenzo. Think you're not strange. I'm going to tell you something. Grab a hold of God, but don't let go. There are times I feel far, far away. There is. In my spirit, I feel far, far away. But I've learned to bless the Lord at all times. At all times. Yeah. You know, one day, I was working in King City, young man, still a young man, early 20s. And man, I was going through a rough spot in my life, like happened to young men. But I learned at a young age that I could only turn to the Lord. I've learned that. I have learned that. You know, and I remember I had a few dollars. I walked over to Safeway out there in King City, and I wanted to grab something to eat. And it's a little town, but I was just a lost little boy in a big old world. You know, and my faith at a crucial time in its life, and my faith wavering, and darkness seeming to be all around me, and walking through this parking lot, and this is a true story. It's a true story. A little boy runs up to me, could have been more than 9 years old. Mister. And I'm right in my mind, I'm like, oh God, I don't got no money to buy nothing for me right now. You know, barely got enough to get up my sandwich. He goes, Mister, and he hands me and I had framed it at one time, I don't know where it is, but he hands me a paper, puts it in my hand. He said, oh no, mister, this is paid for. Turn it around and it said, gain everything, but lose your faith in God, and you've gained nothing. But it says, lose everything but your faith in God, and you've lost nothing. And I'm telling you right now, I have taken that to heart. And in the hard times, I'll bless him. And in the lonely times, I'll bless him. And in the times I don't understand, I'll bless him. And in the time it hurts, I'll bless him. And the time I don't know what I'm going, I'll bless him. Because what I've found is that the things that come to me as a stranger have been a friend to me all along. And maybe it shouldn't have happened the way it did. And maybe someone should have saved you sooner. And maybe someone should have made it clear. But in the end, if the presence of God is still upon your life, then wrap your arms around the situation and know that he's come to you as a friend. I've always paraphrased it this way because this is the way I understand it. And there's a lot we could have talked about Job, but one thing that has always just amazed me about him is that he always understood that what happened to him was Godward. He always understood this is not happening because of the devil. The devil's God's got that guy on a short leash. He can only go as far as he lets him go. And he'll never let him go all the way. Never. Everybody says all hell broke loose. God's too big for all hell to ever break loose. But what I always liked about Job, and this thing, I've said this probably a dozen times in my life since I was a young man. But when Job says, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. You know how I understand? Job is telling God, not even you can destroy my faith in you. Because I know where this is coming from. And not even you can take it from me. You'll give it, and then you'll take it away. You'll take it down, and you'll build it up again. But not even you can take my faith in you. Let us stand. Now, I told y'all this is be more conversational today, not a little yelling, but this altar is open. You know, what you never want to do is let a trial remove you from your work in God's kingdom, to stabilize you. You know, Pastor Tom, I didn't preach a word to nobody for 9 years. Not a word. 9 years. And you know what the Spirit convicted me of during that time? You know, he said, the only thing worse than a dead preacher is one that's alive and silent. The only thing worse than a dead preacher is a silent one. Some of us have dormant gifts, and you've let them sit aside. And the kingdom's calling. The kingdom's calling for you to give it all. For your passion for God to exceed your obligations to Him. You know? And to find a way to walk in the liberty that God has promised you. There are none of you here by mistake. You all have stories. You know, grab onto what God has done for you and to you. And let Him work over and over. I'm going to invite you to this altar. It's open.